Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of MFC's Beyond the Vise. This is a series where we connect with some of the best anglers, tyers, and fly designers on the planet. We'll pick their brains, find out what makes their patterns unique and how they like to fish them. There's going to be a lot of stories and plenty of laughs along the way. I'm your host, Matt Hartman, and today my guest is Kelly Galloup. You've probably heard of him. He's changed the face of fly fishing for the past several decades and introduced countless anglers to streamer fishing for trophy trout with big flies. This is going to be a fun one. It's probably going to be a long talk, so strap in and get ready for some fun. Kelly, I have to ask you.
It was the 70s. I needed the money.
You cut me off. Well, there's so many. I have to believe you hear these weird, outlandish stories about yourself from people when they come in the shop, right? You hear these streamer Jesus, patron saint things. I've seen a candle.
I saw the candle in Brian's shop.
We've got one of those. You've gained this Chuck Norris-like personality that, I think what's fun is that you don't always squash those. You just leave it. Yeah, you think what you want. I climbed a mountain and then caught a 30-inch trout or whatever it is. So are there any really weird, creepy ones you've heard?
Nah, most of them have been pretty based on fact. I mean, they all
They're
end up
loosely
somewhere
based
else.
in fact.
The streamer G, I did not make my own stream. One of my buddies says, "Well, that's kind of sacrilegious." I said, "You stupid fuck! I didn't make that up. Rich down at East Rosebud made that up." And
he would be one to do that. Yeah.
Oh my God. Yeah, he calls me, he sent me one, and he says, "What do you think?" And he hired a character just to do the giant forehead, streamer Jesus guy. And he says, "What do you think?" I said, "It's great, Richie," because he's just a fun guy, right?
Yeah.
And he said, "What do you think?" I says, "You okay if I sell it?" I said, I don't care what you do, Richie. He's just a fun guy, right? He goes, "Oh, thank God, I already sold like 400. He's so fun.
Those guys seem to care the least about what anybody thinks, which is kind of fun. I love watching it. It's fun.
At the very least, he doesn't. Yeah, it's great. But I don't know. There's so many of them out there that it's just it's been entertaining for me too. It's just kind of funny. But anything you heard in Traverse City is Brian Pitzer telling it.
Yep. I've heard a few. Well,
based on fact.
Let me ask you something different. How would you introduce yourself? If you were telling someone it's brand new to fishing, who you are and where you found yourself in the sport at this point.
Dinosaur shit old. I don't know. I don't know. It's an uncomfortable thing. I mean, I don't really introduce myself. I do it on the river all the time or in restaurants or whatever. It's like, I know you. Good, thanks, but not really. I don't know. I get asked, my probably one of the most common questions, what I want to be remembered by, and which I always wonder if that means my clock's ticking a little too quick. But mostly it's about just being a teacher. I mean, it's been the one thing I did most in Michigan, almost exclusively, but the guiding and the teaching and the, I never, I don't have big pictures of myself with fish and shit like that. I actually haven't taken a fish picture in, I think, 7 or 8 years. And it's not that, it was just about being that was the fun part. Like as a guide, you got to do it one-on-one, but then as social media shows up, you get to teach the world, right? It's uncanny how many people from Europe show up and have had an influence of some sort. And I mean, I don't, I know a lot tires 10 times better than me, tons of them. The tires nowadays are so good, so far ahead of any of my generation. And, but you got to have an influence. And it was a positive. That's the kind of cool thing aside from shitting on Euro nymphers for fun, which, Howard Croston just left. He's been here for 6 weeks, and Howard and I fish together all the time. We play with it, but it's none of that. It's all about the positive influence. What you got your egomaniacs that think they actually did something in this. It's just fish. You cut it down. It's just fishing. It is not. We don't cure cancer. We don't. We're just. And if at the end of the day you can say, yeah, I helped some people out, great. But to think that a fly or a technique and time or whatever, your new nymphs that changed the world. It's like, give it up, dumbass. That was 40 years ago. I mean, Swisher and Richards is the last thing that changed our world, right?
Yep.
And maybe you could argue that later it was a streamer, a dungeon or something and the change is simply bringing people in. But then if you say that, then you got to bring a Perdigon in. And now I'm back to having to dirt on those guys for fun. Or
But that's what
or a
I've been lucky enough in my position to talk to so many great minds in this sport. And I think that's such a common thread is being able to recognize that you're giving people tools to enjoy themselves, to feel like a kid again, to go discover and, spend more time outside. And I think that's, I don't know, it's so cool that everyone has gotten to that point from a different path. Yours is streamers, Phil Rowley is fishing still water. It's just, I think that seems to be a very common thing that sticks people in this sport is that rewarding connection with people along the way.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, otherwise, what would it be? What do you want to, I mean, we all know there's certain egos in anything, right?
right.
But they kind of shine through. It's like, you're not really here I don't know how you would even start it out. In the old days, you were known by your fly shop by your flies, right? And the Troutsman Hex, which was the first big mayfly, big hex fly, which was my first national fly actually. But and then the brown drake, there was a Troutsman drake, and a few little steelhead flies. But really, you got your name became synonymous with because you had shops that you'd go to Ray Schmitz for one fly.
Yeah.
You go to Rusty for another one or whatever, Schultze or whatever you do. And you were known for that. That's how you regionally became famous, if you will.
Sure.
And then if you're lucky, you got into fly fisherman or something like that, got an article to give you a little bit more region. But then social media came out. And so in the old days, things had to actually work. If your fly didn't work, your name didn't grow,
Right.
And so, and there was really very little else. There were no fishing report. The fishing report's on a freaking blackboard.
Yeah.
And there was no, and so you had to grow it organically and you had to be real to walk in and, for years, people thought Ray Schmidt and I were mortal enemies. And yet every show, he's one of my best friends I've ever had in my life. But I always talked about it like it was the sheepdog and the coyote on the Roadrunner thing or whatever, that cartoon.
Yeah.
When they check in, morning, Sam, click the clock, and then start beating each other's ass, right? That was Ray and I, but it was a regional thing, and people would, and then what they didn't realize is every show we'd drive together, sometimes room together, eat every meal together, drink together excessively, especially him, giant crow. But then we go down and just start talking trash to each other, right? For fun. And it was
it's
just
like teammates, right? It's
it was
you're gonna
total
razz
teammate.
each other.
And forever nobody knew about it. But Ray couldn't do that if his flies weren't good. If he didn't have something unique, if you didn't have, nor could I, or could anybody else. So you earned it organically, and then you had to be a good person to those people walking in. I mean,
Yeah.
you know, you get too many stories of that guy was an asshole, or, you know, didn't have time of day for me. That's you grew it personal back then. And
Yeah.
so today anybody can come up with a good website or a good, you know, just a social media thing. And my flies are great. I have never heard, being as big a part of Montana Fly Company as I am, and previous to that, another company, that when you have the number of patterns and things, and people infringe on them, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so the companies will ask you, do you think this is too close to your fly? Or things like that, where you get a big influence. And you know, I saw it where people would come in and every time they would send me a fly to send to MFC, they would say, this is the greatest fly. And no, it's caught more fish than anything on earth, right? And it's way better than that Kelly Gallup's thing. I mean, but whatever. But now anybody can do that, but then the fly still has to, the tire heat has to hit the road sometime,
Yep.
right? And so now it's a little more difficult for guys your age. You know, Brian came in, he's 10 years younger than I am, at Northern Angler. And, you know, it was harder. Every year it became harder, and every year to break in. I mean, but the one consistent thing you see, no matter who it is, and there's some giant personalities out there that are, but you know what? There's social media has allowed people to do that without knowing. But the real ones tend to, I mean, they tend to come to the top, and they're because their patterns work, and they have good information. You separate, you know, the shit from the real quickly when you go out and
Right. It's
use
real
them. And so
easy to create your persona, you know,
anything
and
online, yeah, just it's
but over
so
time, just
which.
like you say, it's filtered because people start to figure it out.
Yeah, I mean, and everybody, we always had a rule in my shop where no matter if it's my fly or not, I mean, especially when the streamer thing came, when the streamer thing started back in the early, you know, late 90s, early 2000s, it didn't matter what. After about 5 flies, I could have sent, you know, a tampon with a hook in it and said, greatest fly on earth. And it wouldn't matter, but we wouldn't do that. I
Right.
mean, we had, you know, I started with Russ Madden was very integral to when I was writing the first book. And, you know, Russ is one of those cats where you go out and you test the son of a bitch. You know, that fly either hunts or it doesn't. And he, you know, we had plenty of flies that came off the vise as the greatest thing on earth. And then it was in the dumpster a day or two later. You didn't, you didn't get time to just play.
Right.
It's either it's working or it's not. And you see, but then you see there's another thing that happened in the 80s with royalty tying. I mean, the reason that my name's not on the Troutsman Hex, why it's not called the Troutsman Hex, is because we went from royalty, and then if you left the company, the thing got stolen, right?
Oh.
But before that, anybody could submit. And now you got royalty infringements where if somebody's flies too close to Russ's circus peanut, nobody's going to say, yeah, go for it, and have Russ say, okay, screw it, I'll take my fly somewhere else. That's our only leverage nowadays. But there's so much of the influence of the social media platforms that I think it was so overwhelming and so many people saw through it so quick that it kind of has a negative effect now in the respect that they almost like, yeah, well, I've heard this line before. And
Yeah.
so that, you know, and I think that the new anglers, because of social media, are so much better than when I grew up fishing and learning. You're lucky if you had a mentor, or if you're lucky in my generation in the 70s, you were lucky if you had a friend who fished. I mean, there wasn't, when I graduated from Traverse City, in all reality, and there were, in fly fishing, there was, that I knew of, there were really only 3 guys I knew who fished in my class. And I think we had like 800 kids in our class, but you got, so when Traverse City still had only one high school, there was a ton of them, whatever it was. And then you got 3 or 4 classes around you, you senior, whatever, you come in. But to think that I knew one kid, Barney Ewing, who's guy that taught me how to do a dubbing loop. Barney was a year or two older than me. I knew his little brother was a year younger, but just Chet and Billy Robinson and I, and that was it, right? That was, it just didn't have any influence. And so now, shit, you can look at everybody on earth fishing.
Sure.
But the thing you'll see with that, like today's a tragic day. Yesterday, Flip Pallet passed.
Yeah.
And you'll see the people who were the greatest influences in the world had the smallest egos and could give a shit. They might have big personalities, but they're not out talking shit about how great they were. I mean, getting Flip to say much of anything is hard to do. And so it was. So you find that it's the real comes through no matter what. The real people shine through. It's never because they're giant egos. It's because they've taught. And if you look at anybody like Flip in particular, he was a spectacular teacher, right? But you never heard him saying, I did, or, I got this fish on this,
Sure.
I got that big one because this fly I tied. That's such a crock of shit.
Well, that's actually a perfect lead in for a question that I wrote down. And it's something I saw for years in the shop. And do you think there's just this huge over focus on patterns over presentation?
Absolutely. I mean, I like to equate that because I love bass fishing, right? And I always, people ask me if I miss Michigan. I say I miss sitting out on East Bay fishing smallmouth, or in Craig Phoebe's private ponds were stocked full of giant bass. But there's always been, and I would not take emphasis off of patterns because certain patterns have been tested. That's why I said we tested our patterns for a year for most part before we ever release them. But to think that you can just go throw, and it's what's wrong. It's what keeps general tackle anglers from becoming really good quickly, is they think they can just throw a Kevin Van Dam Strike King, out in the middle of the lake and pull it back or through the river, and just reel it in and not have any clue. I was told once by Shaw Grigsby, I asked him a personal question, which I've used in every seminar I've ever done. We were speaking in Michigan at Lunkers in Edwardsburg, Michigan. Okay. I think it's out of business now. It was a gigantic shop. And there's this spring show has from Bill Dance, Van Dam, both Linder brothers, Babe Winkleman, back in the day. These are the biggest names in the world, right?
Right.
And then Jack Dennis and I, because they just put in a fly fishing department, which was 6,000 square feet, right? Absolutely giant when he did things big. But Shaw and I and Shaw was starting to do these fly fishing shows. He'd just have fly fishing on his show. And I walked up and said, you need to get out of my business. He said, I love that fly fishing stuff. And so, but at any rate, he Hunter, can you get, but at any rate, I said to him, we're walking to lunch. And I told him I'd send him a book and all this stuff. And I said, because if you understand bass fishing, because I talk about it a lot, people say, is this your desire to be a bass fisher? No, I just think they're the best anglers in the world. They fish for millions of dollars. If golf didn't have, if the FedEx Cup wasn't going to pay you $50 million and you weren't going to get, just to be 50th, get 300 grand, I mean, you wouldn't have all these great golfers, right? And in the bass world, you have, you win a big show. I mean, even just a qualifier, you could be 400,000 on that, right? Yeah. Second place might be 150,000, and you got 20 shows to do, and then you got the big show, which is a $5 million payout or whatever it is, plus all your contracts. the best of the best. If you could just go, if anybody could go throw a lure out there, there would be more than one Kevin Van Dam,
Right.
right? And so I like to use that. But in the fly world, it is what we put so much emphasis on the fly, but we put very little like on how to read water, where the fly. I mean, with the books, my focus was always you needed a fast, slow, and a medium game. And, doesn't matter what Kelly Galloup sex dungeon you throw out, if they're not on an aggressive, bite, or if you're, it doesn't matter. You better have a jig game. You better have you better have a stall game. You better have a lot of shit going on. Otherwise, you're just pulling the rope, right? I
Right.
mean, that wouldn't,
Exactly.
the fly's going to make one difference, but if it's a slow day, you're not getting a need on a reactionary fly. One of my favorite flies I've ever designed is called a Slick Willie. It's just hit numbers for me of big fish, fish over 24. It had but it was 100% a reactionary super speed bite fly. It has no slow game. It has a good stall game, but it doesn't have a slow game. And so, given you have that opportunity, that perfect day, sure, it's a great fly. So's a white sex dungeon. So's a whole bunch of flies. What happens if it's a slow day? What if they're on a sculpin day? Excuse me. So the fly is super important that the fly actually does what it's supposed to do. But if you don't have the ability to make it do what it's supposed to do, like a Nancy P, which is a total crayfish jig fly,
Right.
really, really nice. I mean, great. Every once in a while somebody gets one burning it. 98% of those fish, that fly has to go up and down and do its, just fluff out and become that. It just, the fly becomes secondary to the angler's ability to move the fly. And a lot of people, it's not like it used to be, but in the old days, people were really hip to dry fly fishing, right? And it's the equivalent of saying, yeah, you've got the perfect no hackle, fly for the perfect thing, but you're skating it. Well, you're not skating it on purpose, you're called dragging it, right? And so who gives a shit how good it is? Well, but we tended to dumb down streamers and say, which was good for me. I mean, I'm a royalty fish. If you want every color of every dungeon and every size, great, get them 6 deep. But
Yep.
know that it's the angler, not the fly. And so, and 9 times out of 10, it's the angler's ability to read water and actually stall a fly or speed a fly in a section where it needs to be, and they actually read water. So I would say, I would never take the emphasis off a great fly and a great design because somebody put a lot of effort making that fly do something. That's where I don't think a lot of people understand how much the dungeon took 3 years to get to where it was. It started in Traverse City with a woolly sculpin, and we were learning to articulate because we saw enough flies get hit in the head, not nobody touching it because our hooks were so big, right? We used huge hooks back then.
Big
And
Carrie Stevens hooks.
Yeah, some of those hooks are 5.5 inches long. And so, I mean, I think the first really superstar was Russ's original Peanut. And that, and I don't know, I still don't know if it's the fly or if it was the fact that the positive hookup was the thing. We just got enormous positive hookup. Whereas before we got lots and lots of eats, but we didn't get the hookup. And so that changed everything. But there was no fly, maybe maybe the circus peanut, which has changed several times. I still don't think any fly. I remember when Russ hucked that fly on the table, and I was working on a dungeon style, and I was trying to figure out how to get the hooks where I wanted them. And Russ walks in, throws it on the table, and it starts rolling around, looking like it was alive. And it was the first fly I've ever seen with rubber legs in a streamer on purpose, other than like I think the first rubber leg fly was really the wet skunk, the Michigan skunk. But that that was more of a nymph type style, but not really. It was streamer fish mostly. But But it was when Russ threw that thing down and it starts moving all over. I'm like, holy shit, what is that? I forget what I said. What is that thing? A clown car? And he goes, no, it's a circus peanut. And we took it
I
out.
could picture the
That
smirk on
thing,
his face too.
oh God, he's got a one-liner for everything.
He
But
does.
he's the funnest guy. But that, if you go back in time, that may be one of the few flies that never needed changing ever in history. Right out of the vise, I don't think I've had two flies in my life came out of the vise and went, yeah, that's how I want it. And so, I mean, that's why I would put some emphasis on the fly as well. But at this point, if you take a dungeon or, I mean, the dungeon in particular, or any of the TNA bunkers, the shaped heads, the wool heads, everything's an adaptation off of that style. And there's just, yours idea, Pitzer's, Russ's, Alex, any of these guys, Schultz, these guys, Richie Strolis. There's just so many people out there, these spectacular tires. And it's their adaptation of the same thought process. It's their thought of what a head looks like underwater. And that's kind of where you separate the wheat from the chaff. When someone who sees underwater before they, any fly can come out of a vise and you dial that thing up before you take its little rotary pitcher, and every freaking light's touching that fiber just right, and every fiber's fly out just like it's not soaking wet and a piece of shit that's been hugged through the mud like it's going to be as soon as you get it out there. Everything looks beautiful. But can you
Right.
see past that to what it's doing underwater? How's that? Where's the reflection going to come from, right? That's the Russ Maddens of the world, the guys who see before it goes, they see it underwater.
Sure.
Long way
I
around the barn say, I think there is emphasis on the fly, but mostly it's the angler.
and that's I see that as well, because I think a fly is a tool, and you can use a tool the wrong way. You can use a screwdriver wrong, a saw wrong, anything wrong. I see it as a lot of anglers are going to the shop and buying flies because it's something easy to control. Well, let's cycle back to flies real quick. We were talking about
what we're here for, right?
What's that?
No, that is what we're here for, right?
Yeah, I guess. Well, whatever. We're here to have fun, right? And have a few laughs. That's the whole point. So, and not take it too serious, right? So,
not dribble down the front of your shirt when you spit your tea out.
Everybody needs a good, if there's a spit take in a podcast, it must be a good one. So that's how I think about it.
Exactly.
So we were talking about the importance of a fly, maybe being undervalued, overvalued. I think sometimes anglers will, because it's something, it's in front of them, they can control and understand quickly in a fly shop when they're picking a fly out. What's the best way you've found to convince people to spend more time on the water, learning to read water, and instead of just buying more flies or buying more gear? Because I think we can all agree you can have the best gear on the planet, and if you're not spending time how you actually use it, it's useless.
Mm-hmm. But you do realize I own fly shops, right?
Right. I've worked in fly shops. I work for MFC. Yeah. I want to sell flies.
But, there's just no way to talk like this without sounding like you're self-centered. But one of the things that we do in the shop, to drive this point home, I hear it frequently from the zones where I think the best anglers in the world come from, which is Michigan and Pennsylvania, or that zone of really techie dry fly stuff. And they'll come in my store and they'll constantly tell me, well, my flies are all from back east. They don't work here. I said, well, let's take a look through your box. I said, I'll bet you have everything you need. A sulfur's a PMD. It's just not that hard. And we go through their boxes and I frequently say, you just need to go fish. No, I got to get something. I said, no, you really don't. There's no cover charge to walk in this place. You're going to need flies before it's over, right? But
right.
What I do is I convince people that they need very few. and in particular on a river like this, right? And I like people to put a lot of emphasis on reading water. You know, the first thing we tell everybody on this river in particular is this river's 10 feet wide and the rest is scenic value. You do not cast into a raging whitewater and hope a fly. It's like, you just don't hope it, you hunt it. And so we try to drop it, you know, to the human, you know, we essentially start by underselling as much as we can and just say that's not really the critical point. The critical point is that you're going to nymph fish and or whatever you're going to do, right? You're going to nymph fish and you need to understand the fish are 3 feet from you. Most of the fish are within 4 foot of the shore or on shore. You're stepping on them. So we try to educate first. But when it comes to the flies, I like to walk people through and just show them and say, you know, like with the expansion of the new shop, we're going to have, I don't know how many thousand patterns, like 6 or something. We're expanding those 64 unit things by 28 or 36 more units. There's going to be a, you know, 2,000 square foot room of just flies. Well, I need to sell flies, obviously, but most, you know, that's mostly online business, but I still, and you know, Johnny in particular, as much shit as I give Johnny, he probably has the highest threshold of ethics in the world. He just cannot, you can't say something. If I tell somebody the name of a fly wrong, he needs it corrected instantly, right? We call him the corrector. But, and one of the things that came out of our discussions on the expansion of the flies was that you were, and it might have been from Braden. I don't remember. Kid that just walked in and ruined our podcast or our, whatever this is, my camera guy. And he says, boy, you know, you're really going to have a section that says Johnny picks because Johnny fishes so hard and he's the best guide I've ever seen in my life. And he's so true to what he does, right? And he said, that spinner's great, but it just doesn't fish here, right? He's my biggest critic. He says, I just can't get him to eat that fly of yours. I said, well, they eat the shit out of it for me. He goes, I don't care. It doesn't fish. And so, and he's the litmus test. So
Right.
if he can't get his clients to fish it, then he doesn't want it in with the popular picks, right?
Right.
And so we're coming up with a whole section of like Johnny pick so that it's not, you know, you don't have how many spinners are there? There's probably 20 spinners for every class. And so what we do is we try to walk people through and say, you know, this is a really great, like Renee Harrop's spinner, which is a Henry's Fork fly, placid water. Well, we're the polar opposite of the Henry's Fork. We are essentially we're not a freestone. We're a tailwater, but it acts like a freestone because it's pretty much straight down, and it drops in this upper section maybe 80 feet a mile, and the regular flow it's 50 feet a mile, where the Henry's
Okay.
Fork might drop, you know, 8. So one's flat, one's racing down the river, and so you know but I really like one of his spinners, and it fishes really well for me, but it sinks easily because it's not designed to be in broken water. And so I walk people through it and say, listen, you know, you got 6 of these. Maybe I get a feeling like they're not used to our river, or maybe I think they're kind of new. And you're going to get, if you pick your water well, you might get a 3-foot drift with that if you're lucky, but you're going to have to pick it really well. And, you know, because the water below the actual pool that they're on is raging. Can you lay it with enough serpentine in your leader to stop that from happening before the line finally catches and goes straight shoots down the fly? Because when you go out and don't catch fish, well, who's the bad guy? That's me. I'm the one that picks the flies, right? And so you got to do more than just give them a fly that, you know, you could fish or Russ could fish or I could fish. You got to kind of feel it out a little bit and say, you know, there's a guy my age, you know, I said, I can't see that little son of a bitch. I said, well, you know, sometimes you got to play blind. You just got to go, you know, and you got to do things, but you've got to figure it all out. And the emphasis on the fly, for example, our fearless leader, Jake has some really good patterns. Well, Jake's influence was on the Henry's Fork. I mean, he's 15-year guide there, I think, and or something like that. But he also fished here a lot. So he has a lot of really good blend patterns, right? That are just in that zone. And so I'll push that fly. And what I get more often than not, he goes, wasn't that yours? It's got my name on it. And isn't that yours? Yeah. I said, I don't think that's the fly you want today. Right. And so
Right.
this one's been working better. And so we do it with a pure honesty thing, kind of trying to, it all goes back to that same thing. It's one customer at a time, and it's a lifetime. And we just teach as much as you can, and, don't sell stuff that just to sell it. Eventually you will. I can't tell you how many kids, in particular Pennsylvania, that came in because they had such a huge, they have such a population of really great fly anglers, right? And the water's techie as shit. It's overused. I mean, it is tough.
Yeah.
And
It's super
they would
technical.
come in, yeah, just as techie as it gets. And they would come in and I would say, you've got everything you need. And they would always say, well, I got to buy something. I said, trust me, you'll need it. You don't need it today, though. Why don't you? And that really messes with people's minds.
Right.
I said, if you want to spend money, you can. But I'm just telling
I'm
you
here to take
that
it.
if you go, you can go fish what you have. And there's another point to that a lot of time, like I buy shop flies from other people.
Yeah.
Mike Lawson drives him crazy. I'd go in, he said to me, I was like, why do you always buy flies in here? And I said, because they're different. He
Yes.
goes, they're the same damn fly. I said, they're not in my bin. It's my chance to buy something that I don't even care. Maybe it's, hell, I've bought my own flies in Mike's
Right.
shop because it's my chance to be fun again. Like, I've had a fly shop since, 80, 79 or something. And it's like, no, it's just fun. So that part's got to come in too. But as a whole, what I do is just try to educate the hell out of them. So they walk out and they go to another shop and they go, or do you get sold a bill of goods the next place you go into? Do they say you need 6 spinners for one hatch? Oh, well, this one, come on, dude, it's a dead fly. And so we've just always done it that way. And I think the emphasis should be that because an educated angler is eventually going to, well, to tell you the truth, I encourage people to tie.
Yeah.
I really, as much as I make a good portion of my income is off, fly sales, but you don't become this one could get me in some shit. I see people who don't tie that get good, but I've seen very few who get great. And I encourage people, like I said, as much as I like them to buy flies, I think there's only a certain level you hit until you design your own fly to where you can critique the fly in the bin, right? If you say, well, that fly does or doesn't do this or that, right? And I think it's really imperative for anglers who want to become really, really good that they do that they tie. And I know a handful. I've just not met very few people who ascend to the top of what I consider the best anglers in the world who don't rely on they may still buy flies, but they tie and they design. And it's kind of like, I've seen very few superstar anglers that weren't guides at one point. And I think guiding becomes, I have a hard time for a professor who's writing in Fly Fisherman who's never guided and has been guided all around the world, because I've guided all those people. I got really fortunate, really young to be one. I got picked up from Fly Fisherman when I was barely. I think I did my first article in 80. I don't remember, 1, 2, or 3, something like that. And I was guiding John Randolph, but
Okay.
who was the editor. And so, but I met him through guiding someone who knew him. And we were doing different things. We were fishing fall steelhead. Nobody fished fall steelhead. Few bait guys did, but no fly guys did. We didn't know where they lived. We didn't know anything. We were just not what we did. We fished springs, you know. In Michigan, you had bird season. You had, you know, November 15th, about the time you start really seeing steelhead, it's deer season, and you
Yep.
went deer hunting, right?
Yeah.
You sure shouldn't run out flowing feathers at the son of a bitches. And so, but what I've seen is that and I just, you know, because I get asked so much about what makes a great angler. And, you know, guiding to me makes great anglers in the respect that, yeah, you're a superstar, you're a badass because you can go out and catch fish. Go teach somebody else to catch a fish. Now we'll see what you're made of. And you watch that one, you go to a 10, 20 deep guide staff, there'll be two that are unbelievable, right? Or maybe you get 4 or 5 or 6 if you're lucky. But you gotta, it's that person has the ability because what that tells me is that they can read through water. They they know what the fly's got to be doing when it's there. And so is the fly doing what it's supposed to do? And so once you can teach that, the only way you can teach it is to know it, right? And then when you start, I've never seen a great guide. I shouldn't say that. I'm sure I have. I don't know. That's kind of bold statement. The best guides that I can think of right now all tie their own flies. And in the old days, as a guide, that's what made you, just kind of like the shop thing when I was talking earlier. What made you is that your flies separated you from every other guide on the river. And if you go back in time to the peak of the Pere Marquette, when you're coming in and you're holy shit, you know, when I started guiding, I never saw, well, we didn't use boats in the old days. When back in the 70s, when I started there on a weekend, occasional weekend, the only person I ever saw was Walt Grau and John Clusing. And that was a weekend thing, right? You'd guide occasionally
Right.
and use Sports Pal canoes and you use them for transportation. And so, and you look at as it grew, and all of a sudden there was like, when Johnson's opened up on the PM, there was like, I forget what 22 guides or something. I don't even think they had permits. And there was just, well, I mean, the guides did, but not Johnson didn't have it for it. It was unbelievable. The growth. I've never seen any river blow up like that. And Russ Madden's got a great quote where he says, the only difference between you and everybody else is your fly. Well, that doesn't mean the store-bought Kelly Galloup sextungeon. That means the Russ Madden variation because they've seen the Kelly Galloup sextungeon every day, and now you've got one that's slightly different. And it's that to me, you know, it's kind of the full transition from starting to fish and, you know, tying and then you go out and you adapt to fly or you change, you know, Gallup's heads are too tight or they're too fat or they're too this or too that. I had a kid send me a zoo cougar with a brush head. He sent a picture first. I did a thing on the podcast about him. He asked for a critique. And the son of a bitch was perfect, right? There's
Right.
nothing we could critique on it. His thing was absolutely stunning. And I said, I don't know. I've never tried this. And I kept looking at it going, holy shit, this thing is unreal, right? And so I said, I don't know, maybe it's got one too many turns. It might be too heavy. And then he called me and I said, yeah, I did. I was thinking taking one off of it anyway. And I said, but I'm telling you, it sculpts perfectly. I just got to take it and fish it and see. Hell, I might start doing it to my own. But there's an adaptation, right? And I just want to make sure it doesn't sink it too quick. I don't want the fly going down quicker. It's designed to do something, right?
Right.
And I mean, I probably have had, being that was my first really big national streamer, was the Zoo Cougar. I have probably been asked, I mean, literally no less than 5,000 times, have you ever thought about putting a wool head on it? And I just kind of have to bite my tongue and go, do you really think that somebody does this for a living didn't think about, maybe I want it? I said, well, you know, the purpose of the head isn't to sink the fly. It's actually to make it do just the opposite. Sculpin don't have advanced splin bladders. I want it to hover. two of my biggest fish, I have one on film last year. I got a 28 and a half, ate that son of a bitch dry, floating dead drift.
Damn.
And one of my biggest fish on the Asabo was the same thing. It wasn't supposed to be dry. It wasn't supposed to be floating. The guy just couldn't catch up with the line, and it's floating. And he's new. It's his first time ever fly fishing. He pops a 27 something, and eats it in the middle of Flower Flats in the middle of the sun at 1 o'clock in the afternoon, and come up and hoovers that son of a bitch like it's a porn star, and just eats
Shark
it. I
attack.
said, "There's no way we're losing this fish." That thing was down its ass. It
That's
was like,
awesome.
holy shit. But anyway, that long-winded way around to say the transition is going like explaining flies and then trying to push people to tie, because it truly elevates your A game to another level. And I have seen a handful of anglers that don't tie, that have got there, but they also have a keen eye for what the fly actually does. So when they're buying one in a store, they're the guys that sit and just stare at the fly to see if everything's where it belongs. And yep, okay, that fly's going to throw the silhouette I want. And they somehow got there without tying, right? They got there. And by today's standards, the tires, and if you look at the flies of today from, the commercial tied flies, they're so good. They
Yeah.
are so much different than they were 30 years ago. And so you can get, KK's spinner or whatever, or Schmidt's emerge or whatever it is. It is so accurate. They've got such detail and control on the production that it's a different world than it used to be. It is truly a different world. And there's certain companies that specialize in that. I mean,
Hmm.
MFC obviously is one of them, or I wouldn't be there.
Right.
Whoever. There's ones that don't. They just produce flies, and it's what it is. Catch. Their flies suck. I like to call them out because they stole everybody's flies, but they did them like shit. And so, they're cheaper. Great for you. If a dollar or two less for a fly, it makes you happy, but it doesn't fish, you're not going to be happy for the next 8 hours of fishing,
Right.
And
Right.
when
Yeah.
it's tracking sideways instead of up and down, but it is what it is.
But I think you're right. I've told people for years, you should try tying. You don't have to be good at it, but it will help you make a connection between what goes into the fly and its cause and effect. Like, oh, I put too much material in this fly, it doesn't sink well, or I didn't put enough wing on this, so it doesn't float well.
Right.
I think it gives you a better full picture to put the equation together, if that makes sense.
Sure.
Yeah.
And even if you're buying your flies, that's the whole
Yes.
point. It's like I'm always talking, I overtail not by quantity, but by length on my mayflies.
Okay.
I usually make my flies they wouldn't sell well, my flies. And when I'm in production, right? My tails are too long. I like that stability of that, knowing that it's not piercing the surface. But I just think it fishes better for me. But yet it's not proportioned the way traditional would be. That might not sell as well. And some of my flies that I do that with, I don't even produce, because I don't want them sitting in somebody's shelf and saying, well, they're not selling. Well, that's because the tail's too long, right?
Right.
Or whatever it is that you've adapted. But in the long run, no matter what, when people do start tying, or at least trying to, they start being able to judge other flies by their, which and critical to a fly is nothing other. I tell everybody that comes to my store, flip the damn thing upside down. Don't look at the top of the damn fly. It's the dumbest thing on earth. You could have a hula dancer of it. It doesn't matter. They only see the silhouette, and think about where it's sitting in the film. Because think about how a real fly lays its abdomen, part of its thorax. I mean, they lay in the water. All of them are different. A midge is different than a caddis. Caddis is different from a mayfly or a crane fly. Does it run on its tips of its legs? What does it do? And try to think. And what tying does is it gets people looking at the natural and, you know, then maybe they even go upside down and look at them, you know, and then it gets you that perspective of what's really making the fish eat it.
Right.
And then you
Yeah.
screw it all up because you throw a fucking Royal Coachman out there and it eats the shit out of it. And so, and then it all goes to shit, right? It's like, what the
It's
hell?
so true.
I mean, one of my I have rules in July, right? And I have 4 weeks. Every week has a different set of rules. But one of them is that nothing before 1960, right? The final week is horsehair tippet and nothing before 1960. I get 3 fish a night. And if I whiff one or if I line one, that's mine. That's one. If I screw up, I'm out. So now I get 2 fish a night, right? But when you're fishing horsehair tippet in a 1958 fly, things change, right?
Yeah.
And I only use pre-1972 Fenwicks and Flugers or Hardy reels. And so, and it makes it interesting to see because you go back in time, right? Or maybe I'm traditional wet fly upstream only. What a pain in the ass that is,
Man.
right?
Upstream
And I'm
only?
fishing hatches. I only fish at night. I don't get to fish all day. And so it gives you this really fun but you get to see, like I said, you know, I put on a Royal Coachman, they eat it. If you, previous to me moving here, just a little on the Madison, you basically fish this river with 3 flies. And I've had a couple old guides tell me I ruined our river. You know, we used to be able to fish 3 flies and everybody's happy. Now you got to have goddamn 10 flies. You be grumpy old guys and everything on earth. We all ascend there, right? Or descend, I guess. Yeah, you get shorter. But it's just one of those things. But for me, it does tell you there's a vulnerability to the trout's mind that if they'll eat everything wrong, you know, and still eat it. I was talking about Brian O'Keefe earlier. Brian called me one time, I don't know, I think it was 3-4 years ago. And he said, what have you been doing this week? I said, well, it's horsehair week. And he goes, what? And I go, yeah, it's final week of July. And everything is a spinner fall then, you know, it's all Epeorus
Okay.
spinners and caddis. You got 3 different caddis going and you got Epeorus but by the time I get to go out, it's usually just spinner falls. And he says, but I can't fish the same fly too. I cannot fish, and I'll have to pick the fly every night, and it can't be the fly I know that's working. I can pick it I get a week. I can pick the fly one night, but then it can't be that fly. And so now I got adaptations. Well, God help you if it's 1960s week, because there's not that many freaking flies, right? And so I go out and I told him, he goes, well, what's the fly? And I says, tonight's a traditional red fox with 5 turns of gold tinsel. And it's an evening spinner. There's no gold tinsel in a spinner. There's not much reflection in a spinner, or any mayfly for that matter. He goes, that's unbelievable. I'm doing the same thing. He goes, I've been on the South Fork for 2 days, and all I'm fishing are size 12 and 14 Cahill traditional. They're eating the shit out of it. I go, I haven't seen one in 30 years, you know? I don't believe they have memory. It wouldn't matter. Fish are not going to live 30 years, obviously. But
Right.
It's like, but for some reason, they just get happy as shit on these old school flies, but still not like they would the real one, right?
Right,
But
right.
it's kind of throws a monkey wrench in the whole gearbox there, because what's making them eat it? Well, it's a good drift. They're eating a good drift, right? And so it tells you there's a lot of vulnerability to the fish. If you are back to the original thing, if you're fishing it right and you're getting the right drift it's kind of a cocky. I told several of my guides, I heard it once from other guides in my store, and I have the fireable offenses thing about what can get your ass fired as a guide.
Mm-hmm.
There's 2 comments, that one in particular, if I had any talent in my boat, if I ever hear that, and every one of them gets told this before they get hired, if I hear you listening to or talking to someone on the porch or say that, I will fire you on the spot. And if you think I'm lying, fucking try it. I mean, you're there to be a teacher, right? And
Yes.
so you hear that, or the other one was, What do they eat? A good drift. Oh yeah, you're a badass motherfucker. Yeah, you are the toughest son of a bitch on earth. They're eating a good. Oh, so what was your job? Oh, to teach how to make a good drift.
Right.
So you'll hear a guide say something like that. Simply means you're a shit guide. Shit guides don't get to say, first of all, that's your paycheck. You just shit in that guy's lunch bucket. Well, he ain't coming back.
No.
So they're eating a good drift. That's true. That's why I say the greatest anglers are guys who guided. They they teach, because to teach it you have to have achieved it, or at least be able to tell someone how to achieve it. That's when things start
Which is
changing.
even tougher. I think it's way more difficult to articulate what you're doing to find repeatable success.
Yeah.
I think that's one of the most,
Very.
the toughest things is, I know, I'm sure you do too, like dozens of amazing anglers. And I don't think a lot of them could not actually tell me what they're doing that's different. They just do it.
They
And
may not. They may not even know what they're doing
Right.
that's different.
right.
Right. I had a really unique. I had one of Tiger Woods' swing coaches once. I don't even know what it was, and we were on the Big Manistee at King's Trout Ranch. I don't even know if it's still there,
It's
but it was.
not really.
Yeah, okay. There's a guy named Dan Coutu used to have a fly shop in that back in the late 60s, 70s. And that's where I kind of started most of my guide career. And so, anyway, I'm putting the boat in there. We had a little, we had a little boat launch we kind of
Mhm.
fabricated out in front of his place. And but the guy, it's in my truck, in my expedition, and he's got the back up, and I'm pulling the rods out. And he says to me, I don't know what he does. No, I think I did know. I think he told me he was a golf guy. And I don't know, I just said that he worked Tiger on his irons or something. I don't know what it was. Whatever. And he said, but anyway, he goes, how long does it take you to tell if your client knows what they're doing? I said, well, you notice I took my rods out of the truck, but not yours. I'm going to watch you pick those rods up and walk to my boat, and I'll know everything I need to know about you before you get to my boat. And he laughed and he goes, I can do the same thing with golf clubs. He says, they pick that bag up, and he goes, I'm like, oh shit.
Yeah.
I
Yep.
go, yeah. When a guy grabs that fly rod at the ferrule and walks over with it in the middle with the rod straight up and down, it's like, this is going to be a learning experience. It
Yep.
is what it is. It's familiarity. I don't care what sport in the world it is.
Yeah.
You know,
And that's
who
okay.
wasn't
It's
mesmerized the
okay
first
too,
time?
right? It's just like, okay, this is something we
Yeah,
can
yeah,
teach
no,
on.
that
You
just
know, it's
tells you where
just
you're at.
exactly.
You
And
know,
that's
and the worst 5 words you can hear when somebody does that is, "I just got back from Alaska." That, and then you'll get started asking, when are we going to pull out the flesh fly? It's-
yeah. Expectations are,
yeah,
sky
yeah,
high. Yeah.
oh yeah.
It's
They caught a million of them up there, and oh well, it's going to be different. But that's okay.
yeah.
That was, you know,
Well,
all you
can
have to
I
do if you want. Go
can I
ahead.
circle back real quick? You were
Absolutely.
talking about July rules.
Mm-hmm.
And this is something I've seen other accomplished anglers do, is challenge themselves and limit themselves. And I call it seeing what you can get away with. And I think it's such a cool thing to challenge what we think we know, which is you need the perfect fly all the time. And I don't know where I'm going with this, honestly, but I think it's a cool thing that I see a lot of other anglers do.
Mm-hmm.
It just,
Well, the limiting I don't know. I mean, after a while, and I also have rules in the fall when I'm hunting trophy fish, or in the spring is actually when I think you get your really giants. But when I'm on a trophy hunt, uh, there's always rules, right?
Mhm.
But your expectations are to see a fish a day if you're lucky, right? And
Right.
so, and the rules change for trophy hunting in that I don't care about seeing a 22-inch fish. You put yourself in a mindset to, it's, I liken it to trophy whitetail hunting. A 140 comes out and you cap it, you're never going to get a 170 in your life, right?
Yep.
If your expectation is after 2 hours of trophy hunting, you haven't had to eat, so you start putting on something that is going to put the bend in the stick, well, you're not really trophy hunting. You're just pretending you are. And so one is a lesson in discipline, I guess, that you will, and there's some question whether a giant fish is often is not kind of a fluke, right?
Right.
And like that 28.5 that ate a frickin' dry fly, zoo cougar, size 2 olive zoo cougar on the surface. Well, duplicate that. Good luck, But you don't really get to count those fish because you didn't get them.
Right.
That's just pure dumb luck. But it's the same thing. One's a trophy mentality. The other is, you're out, you're challenging the fact that do you really have to catch, what's the success rate? What is it that I got, 23 last night, great. Okay. How many were over 18 inches or 19? Well, so now you say, okay, so you were fishing to catch fish. Do you go out? I go out to catch, if you get 3 fish a night, you're not going to throw to a pot of 5-inchers.
Right.
you're just not going to do.
Yeah.
And you're going to start. And that's why I said, if I line one, I'm out. That's my fish. Because that means I didn't really see. And by the way, I'm only fishing the heads up. I'm only fishing 2 topwater feeders. And so I'm looking at the fish. Is that fish, 18 to 20 something? Is it one we're going to waste our casts on? Because if you get 3 fish, you get 3 fish. And if you blow it, if you make 2 shitty casts or you line one and zip it or whatever you do, you're out, right? You only got 1 fish. Well, now your night's getting shortened. So you start, and I find it really fascinating to watch, like, is a fish feeding from right to left or left to right? Is it head up straight? Is it doing something like that? And so now you make yourself learn, right? Can you hook a cast? Most people can hook a left hook into their line. Can you hook a right? That's really tough, right? And so there's a lot of different ways to do things. And then if you know that you put the fish down, there's no audience. There's no one there. You are the one that has to say, you're a piece of shit. You are in the penalty box. You don't get another shot at that fish. And so it becomes less of, numbers and more of, okay, what a quality eat you got. My biggest fish I've ever seen on this river eating dry flies was 3 years ago. And I bowed out on her 17th night. And I hooked her 3 times. And it's a giant. I mean, this fish was high 20s, I don't think she'd go 27, but I think she was 26.5, right in that zone. And free feeding in this, I see her every other third night or so in the same zone. And it was very easy to see her. And the last night, I'm out of the rules night. And I see her and she's feeding perfectly. And I'd never really hooked her. I'd pick up and she'd swim a little and poof, my fly would pull up. And I'd get like a foot, maybe 3 feet of line, poof, unbuttoned. I'm like, holy shit. Knowing full well that she's feeding left to right and I'm getting pulling the line where it belongs or whatever it is.
Yeah.
And I lose her, right? And on the 17th night of her showing, and now rules are all off, right? Now it's like 2nd or 3rd of August. I'm like, you're going down. And I sat there and she got on the most perfect rhythm I've ever seen. And I thought about that month of trying to, and I went, no. I walked. I just left her there. And it was like, even as I was walking away going, really? You're leaving her? And I said, yeah, she wins. That's cool. I kept thinking, and if I got her, I had a really good inkling because now I don't have to play this, especially the last week as horsehair tippet. I didn't throw to her with horsehair. I just didn't. Yeah, I did once. And that was one where I got barely hooked it, right?
Yeah.
And then I thought, okay, so I'm out because I don't get to go again. That was my fish. I don't get to throw 3 more at her. And that's your one out. And so, but I knew when I hooked her, she was going to go in that super fast water. And I just thought, I might drown her. I might kill her trying to race down the river. I don't run like I used to. And so I'm just going to, I took a bow and bowed out and walked away. And so, it was cool. And then the next year I saw a bigger one. It was a big buck up high. And I figured it was karma. And he kicked my ass too. Never got touched. Never got close to me. That's a bitch. I hooked him the first night, and it was rules night, and he was set up in a much easier spot. This was like a monkey could catch this fish, but he was a suicide bite. Oh, he just mowing
Yeah.
half his back's out of the water. He's in 4 inches of water, and I'm like, holy shit! And I threw that, but it was a traditional. It was that red fox, and I threw it over. He ate it. That thing hit me, and I got a 8.5 foot 5 weight Fenwick with a fluger on, and it turned and lined me so fast. I was like, holy shit. Well, of course he came up 3 times during horsehair tippet night.
Right.
And I'm
Yeah.
like, yeah, I'm out. I
Do you
couldn't handle him on 3.
do you think sometimes the fish we don't catch are more memorable?
Absolutely.
And I think
And
they're
I think that if you quit taking pictures of your fish, you'll remember. I quit taking pictures 7 or 8 years ago because I didn't remember my fish as well. And and I'm also sick of the fucking jamming your hands out at the camera. Everybody's heard it. Somebody even sent me a T-shirt because I've said it for so many years that we were going to make a T-shirt that said 17, the new 23. There's somehow in this world, we have decided that 20 is not a magnificent, great trout, and that we've marginalized it. We talk about it all the time. It is hard to hit a damn 20. It always has been. It's a damn hallmark. It is a huge, but when you keep pushing that damn thing out at the camera and call a 16 or 17-inch fish 23, it's like, dude, when you see a 23, you're going to think it's 24 pounds.
right.
It is like, it's freaking huge. 24 on this river. I don't care what river. I don't give a shit if you're in New Zealand, Chile, or Argentina. I don't care. 2 foot's 2 foot. It's freaking monster. But we have marginalized these 20-inch or these 17s and calling them 20s. Like when I was a kid, when you said 20, boy, you better have something that shows it because that's a huge fish, right? And so I've kind of, I don't know where that was going. What made me pissed about that?
Well, I agree. We don't appreciate fish for what they are. I don't know why
right.
I don't know why we can't appreciate the same with brook trout. We can't appreciate a 10-inch brook trout for being a 10-inch brook trout.
Brookie.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's the same.
And a 20-inch brown is a 20-inch brown. And I mean, you want to see things get real, put a bump board in your freaking boat.
Yeah.
Put it where you tap that thing's nose to that and go, whoa. And so, I mean, I had one on the white where Johnny remembers it differently. I was with Jerry Dennis. He's a writer, one of my best friends.
Mm-hmm.
And we bumped this fish. It was a big one. And bumped it in the board. And then Jerry must take a picture of it. I said, I don't really. I took a picture and I showed Johnny. He goes, what was it, 17? And it was 2 foot. That's more than that, I think. It was 25. I showed him the picture in the bump board, and he says, that's bullshit. That's not the same fish. I said, Johnny, it was just, we're so used to the art of pulling your fingers in and placing them so perfectly. Braden's always pissed off in the boat with me. He's like, when we're filming, he's like, I need flatter fish. I says, I don't give a shit about that. Well, they just don't look big if you do that. I said, well, then it probably wasn't. I don't give a shit. This whole fabricating the little fingers out there and, roll your fingers in and place them like this. I'm like, how about you hold the son of a bitch like this? And if you don't like it, you don't like it. Because it's, or put them in a bump board just so you see everyone exactly how long they are. And we've just marginalized it. I mean, growing up in Michigan, there was about 4 people, if they told me hit a 20, that I believed ever in my life. And I don't give a shit if you're talking to hex hatch or not. I don't care. That's still a giant fish. or mousing. I moused for 30 years of my life. And 2-footers, just rare. They just don't happen. And I think Michigan has as many big fish as any rivers in the world. I mean, there are plenty of them out there.
Yeah.
And, but we don't need to bullshit it, you know?
Right.
So
I
it
call
does.
it go gadget arms. It's just
Yeah,
like, it's just,
exactly. How far can you get it's like these guys that shoot out here, it's elk, back home, it's whitetails. But I mean, out here, and you'll see a guy behind an elk 6 feet,
yeah.
you know? So now this thing suddenly looks like a 390, you know? Or you see a guy with a whitetail and his head's this big around and he's like this with this whitey, which is a nice 140 whitey, but you know, if you crawled up on it, would suddenly doesn't, you know, your 140 looks like a 180 when you're 5 feet behind it. What's
Right.
the point? And that's why I quit taking pictures. But the big part is that if I didn't have the picture, I can tell you there's certain rivers in Michigan. I could tell you every basically big fish I ever caught in my life. I'll know exactly where I was standing. I can tell you what it smelled like. I can tell you what the water sounded like, everything, never a picture. You know, if you fish alone, you don't take a lot of pictures.
Right.
Then I did go through a little phase where I was taking adipose pictures. I love brown trout adipose. You know, take just the picture. Don't macro it. Just take the picture. What the hell's that? Great adipose.
Well, we were talking about appreciating fish that we don't catch and remembering them.
Yeah.
And
Yes.
I think sometimes we can learn more from the fish we don't catch than we do. I guess is where I was gonna.
I can tell you that my favorite modern memory is that giant hen that I bowed out on 17th night.
Yeah. Yep.
I have never taken more time or more interest in, you know, capturing that fish in my life. I mean, it was just, and I could have, I mean, who cares? If I went in there with 3X and that fish would feed sometimes she was just blatant. I mean, she was rude how loud she would feed sometimes, almost
It's
like
a
in your
tease.
face. Sometimes I swore she turned like more sideways to eat because she's in this perfect little seam. And just the perfect cushion. It's the perfect casting cushion too. There's no fast water below her to suck my, you know, line down and tighten my leader up. Absolutely, from a fish's perspective, the worst spot on earth you could go to not get caught, right? And I still didn't catch her, but I remember every inch of that, right? I remember the setups every night. I can tell you some nights when she was on caddis, when she get a little reckless on her eats, and especially when I first get there, and there's caddis dipping and some are emerging still or pupating, and I would, and she'd get reckless, right? And it's like, oh, this is suicide. The first night I did it, I couldn't. I'd already fished tonight. The first night I saw her, I had to put on an ant. I decided I had to fish ants tonight. There's no freaking ants. I mean, it was just, she ate that thing like, and I was off. I was like, shit. Oh my God, that was it. I was like, shaking. I mean, I've had a few on the Manistee that, you know, we used to have all those shitty cameras. Even if you were a 35 guy and you carried your beautiful camera, always flash on the water or light. There's a big yellow spot over the fucking fish. Or there's just shit, right? There's nothing that ever. Or you had those 110s and there's water drops on the fucking lens, and nothing ever goes right, you know. And so you take a buddy's picture. You never took your own.
Yeah.
What the hell, you know, you take, especially taking a night fish and the flash goes, there's this giant, poof, there's nothing but 4 inches on the left side of the frame where the body is, what didn't get flashed out. But you remember all of them. You remember everything about them. You remember I mean, man, some of my favorite memories in life are up on the Upper Jordan above Penny Bridge in the ponds.
Mm-hmm.
And the shit that would land in there, the size of birds and all the stuff. And like you said, 10, 12-inch brook trout. Shit, I got 16-inch brook trout out of there one time. I thought I was Kurt Gowdy, for God's sakes. It was like I was Mort Neff, for those of you who are long enough. Mort Neff out, Michigan Outdoors. That goes way back. But it was like, yeah, I mean, holy shit. You know, to say you got a 16-inch brook trout And I remember the smell of those ponds. Remember all that. Never took a camera with me in there once. I almost died in there once too. I stood in one spot so long, it's all mud. Have you ever been up there?
Yeah,
Up
yeah,
above
and you're just
Penny
slowly
Creek?
sinking in, and
I got to my knees, couldn't get out. I literally left, my waders are still there today. I kept rocking. I started truly panicking. It was a July day, so it's warm, but that water's so freaking cold up there,
yeah,
and I can't get out. And I kept rocking and rocking. I finally rocked forward enough to get a stump, and I pulled and I pulled and I pulled to the point where I was so freaking tired. And I'm like 20 some years old now, right? And I got one leg to come out of the boot and never got the other one out. But I did with my other leg, I could kick and swim and pull. And
yeah.
my finally came out of that one, and I couldn't pull my boots out because now I got a mile to walk freaking barefoot in my goddamn long johns, right? I got white cotton long johns on, and I got no sock on one foot, one sock on the other. I gotta walk the freaking pin to the federal fish hatchery, past that son of a bitch to get to my car, and my goddamn waders are still sitting that piece of shit. And I got blaked. I didn't even get a fish. That was awful. They're still there. Gray
Well,
lights, they were called. Vinyl gray light waders.
well, for those of you listening in northern Michigan, maybe you can go on a little treasure hunt and
Yeah.
dig up
Yeah.
Kelly's waders in the swamp.
Just above the federal fish hatchery. Up in the
It's been a few years since I've been up there. That's a fun spot. Well, let me.
Little embarrassing going to your car without your. Luckily, we didn't lock our cars, but I didn't have anything to steal anyway, so I didn't give a
yeah.
shit. But walking through the woods in your long johns, how do you explain that one?
I wasn't going to say anything, but I was thinking.
Well, luckily, to see somebody on the Jordan back in those days was pretty rare.
Right. Yeah, that's funny. Well,
It's,
let me ask you about some of your patterns. They're commercially available through Montana Fly Company. That's why we're here. If you're willing to just go through some of maybe the top sellers, the most well-known patterns, and just a little elevator speech about them. Maybe a teeny bit of design history, what they're for in terms of water types. You know, for someone that's newer to streamer fishing, hasn't seen a dungeon, hasn't seen, Peanut Envy or some of these, just to give them a little skim of what that's about and why they might want to pick one of those up.
Well, the dungeon in the elevator speech, the dungeon was an attempt, which started in Michigan. That was an attempt to get a shorter shank hook up front, and to basically, the woolly sculpin is still one of my favorite flies on earth. If you fish McMaster's to Parmalee without a number 2 tan woolly sculpin, you are foolish. I mean, I think it's the only fly I've fished that, or a black one, in there most of my life. And I've caught, in a guide perspective, I caught arguably more 2-foot fish in that stretch than I have anywhere in the world, and all on the same fly. I was always on a tan woolly. But I was trying to get that into an articulated fly. And so then I got out here, because it was right, I left right shortly after that book came out. And so I got out here and kind of came up with it where I wanted it. And I wanted a bulky head. I didn't want a super heavy fly. My original one had lead eyes, and the ones after that really didn't. Because I've always been a sinking line guy. And I don't necessarily want flies to sink. I don't like flies unless I design it to sink. And that one wasn't designed to sink. It was designed to be a sculpin or a bullhead or a some sort of trash fish that was prey. And so that fly was going to be articulated sculpin basically, and it wasn't. Now it's in 4 sizes and or 5, I guess, with the menages and stuff like that. But it was designed to have a lot of swim to it, keep a bulky head, and if the eyes do anything, it was simply to break it through the film. It wasn't designed to sink, because we were running type 6 sinking lines even back then. And so we wanted a fly that had a lot of action. Basically, just had a couple, 3 colors of it originally. I like all my flies to be in 5 colors minimum. I think that is so critical. There are days when the olive dungeon will outfish anything in the world. Next day, they won't eat one, and they'll only eat yellow. And that's your job to get through to figure that out.
Right.
But so that fly was designed to be a big, it was somewhere between a bait fish and a reactionary bait, so it's like that. Then you take the peanut envy, and it's just and I'll go through 4 or 5 of them. The second one would be the peanut envy because, that fly had 2 parts of design. First and foremost, one of my reps, Brooks Montgomery, who used to be an MFC rep, he retired. Brooks was so pissed at how much sales the circus peanut was killing he goes, "You need to make a fly as good as the circus peanut." I says, "I don't think you can do that." And that, hence the name Peanut Envy. It was like Russ's fly was killing me. And then I saw chestnut and lamprey on the Henry's Fork, which was very strange. And I watched it swim, and I realized that I had done these attempt at trying to get a fly as good as Russ's, because I truly don't think any flies ever got better than the original circus peanut. I don't care. Russ has changed it many times. He must think that there's a better way to do it, because Russ doesn't do things without a purpose.
Right.
But I don't think we've ever beat that fly. So the name Peanut Envy was just trying to hit that threshold. And so, but that became, as flies go, it was lighter, and it was maybe swimmier because of a lot of the marabou. And but that was because of a chestnut lamprey, and I could two-tone it and on that brown and tan one. And that's when that fly took off. And it's a completely different fly, right? Low profile. And you've got to have, I said earlier, you got to have different types of flies, stall flies, reactionary flies, things like that. But you have to have profile flies. So a dudgeon and a peanut are completely opposite flies. One's a giant profile, one more reactionary, one's a very slim configuration. It's very food bite. It's very eelish, or leechish, if you will. It's very slender, very food-based, incredible food-based fly. Not a great reactionary fly, but very food-based. Then you step into like the barely legal. So the dudgeon's always been the best-selling fly. The peanut envy is our top overall big fish catching fly. And the barely legal, which is a bait fish, very reactionary, very realistic, that is our numbers fly. And when you look at my flies, when you look at my guide staff, that's how it's always rolled for numbers. And so then the Slick Willie comes along, which is a really reactionary profile, in your face disco ball, right? Great, super sunny fly day. Shit, dark day fly for me. Now, Braden, the guy who walked in and ruined our podcast a minute ago, or an hour ago, my camera
You won't live that down.
Braden, he's got a lot of shit he'll never live down, including wearing knee knocker shorts, whatever you call those things. And I can't even talk about it without being embarrassed. So but Braden is an incredible angler and a great caster, but he's fished the barely legal in every situation on earth, or not the Slick Willie. And so he's had more, I kind of don't play it too much in the cloud cover, and so he's caught fish on it, but then we changed colors of it. But there's a fly that it has 2 methods. It's burning that son of a bitch and then stalling it, right? And so it's really one method. You burn it, stall it, or just rip it. And it's a reactionary bite, but it has no food bite. It has none of the peanut envy has kind of 2 worlds. It can be a bright fly, bright color, white or something, and get a little reactionary bite out of it, but still a great food bite. Then you go into, I'll take just the 5th one on the articulated world, a Nancy P. Mm-hmm. The Nancy P is it's my only political statement, but it's a, it's a crayfish fly, and it is completely designed to be picked and to, it's a dropper, right? You pick it up, you drop it. You pick it up, you drop it. You're jigging the fly. It's a jig fly. For overall big fish numbers, it's big. That's my number one fly, period. I mean, there's never been a fly that I've caught. We had a day, Johnny and I did, where we had, I'm not even going to tell you the numbers, but it was over 25 fish, and they were all over the mythical mark. It's never going to happen again, I'm sure, in our life. Everyone ate an olive Nancy P. Every one of them ate it on a jig. Every one of them ate it on a stall dropping. And absolute freak show, right? But for really big fish, and so you've got a fly that really doesn't fish that well, anything except a specific style of fishing. By the way, for those of you who fish bull trout, it is stupid what they do to it. They bull trout do the craziest thing, and you jig it and they'd pick it up and shake it and they'd swim away with it. And even though when you'd set the hook, they would just shake their head and they kept swimming. They never ran. 13 of them did it in a row. And they were so convinced it was a crayfish, and crayfish have bitey parts, and they would shake the living shit out of it. They wouldn't take off running. It was the craziest thing I've ever seen. But here's a fly that's designed to do complete, like I have caught a few fish on it, stripping it, like just, especially running it over top of weed beds and then letting it drop over it. And so, but for the most part, it's always a jig, right?
Yeah.
So there's 5 flies, I think. And then, but these are all articulated flies. I think we've lost a lot of, I have said this a dozen times about filming, that I want to do a year of the cougar where I do nothing but zoo cougars, right? And zoo cougars is still probably my favorite fly on earth to fish. Woolly sculpin would be right behind it, and they're super old school. Anybody can tie a woolly sculpin, anybody. In particular, it'd be a fun way to see people throw in those, want to do a brush head, try it on a woolly sculpin. That fly, I mean, we put too much emphasis on these giant, now I don't think, honestly, I've fished a fly over 7 inches in years. We all went through that, Russ and I, and way back when, I remember the Seducers, we were doing those giant, they were bluefish flies or something, and we went up to 13 inches, right?
Jeez.
And it was just stupid. We get a pike now and then, but you just scale back. I saw a big trend, and the musky guys showed up, and bigger, and you'd hear about a fish caught, but you couldn't duplicate it, right? And I kind of scaled back. 7's really and it's got to be a pretty light fly for me. More like 6 is where I end up now. But I do a lot of 3-inch flies. I mean, always have. They always go in my rotation. And so I would pay, and I truly don't think, if you just did it, it'd be hard, I don't know how many years I got left. So I don't want to take a whole one just to do a year of the cougar and say, oh shit, that was a bad run. But if you've ever fished with me, I don't ever get through a rotation. I have basically about a 7 fly rotation of colors and styles. I'll start reaction. I always start fast, bright, and reactionary just because it's fun as shit, right? But start that way. Then you got to stop. You got to keep moving through the idea. You can't go through 7 colors of reactionary flies. If they're not on a reactionary bite, they're not on it. So you got to have something else. You got a stall game where you start stalling flies and kicking them and dropping them over shit, that you're watching. And then, but if I had one fly to do everything, I honestly not sure it wouldn't be a woolly sculpin in 5 colors, because I can reactionary bite it. It's a great food source fly. I can stall it. I can do anything I want with that fly. And a zoo cougar would be up there too, but it doesn't have, it's a darty fly. It's not, it doesn't have the virtues that the slender, the woolly sculpin has, but there's just so many. I mean, the TNA bunker, the original one, the whole bunker style when you're in the, like in the Great Lakes, that's where that thing came from, trying to do an alewife and a
Hmm.
rainbow, babies. That style of fly, that head, my personal favorite fly to fish is a bangtail. Doesn't, and the bangtail, it's got a pretty good following, particularly like that little saltwater style one, the small one. But the bangtail was another fly that's designed to, I mean, when I throw that fly out, I throw it, I hit the water, I twitch it twice, I give it a 3 foot strip as hard as I can and let it sit there for 2 or 3 seconds. And just let the current do whatever it wants to it. And then I twitch it 3 times really fast. I wait to see if, because trout will come under just like a bass. They'll just sit there and you twitch it 3 times really quick. Nothing happens. I get a little tiny pull about 2 foot and just let it sit. And then I do a super long 3 to 5 foot stroke with it and let start that thing all over again. It's fun as shit. I mean, you are so engaged in your fly,
Yeah.
right? And now you
And that
got all
makes you
the,
that makes you fish better, right? If you're engaged with what your
yeah.
fly's doing.
Well, I mean, it makes you learn to do something. You're not just pulling the rope like a mindless monkey. You're doing something different every time you fish. Every kind of fly should have a different. They shouldn't all just be pulled in, 6, 12-inch pulls. I mean, make it do something. At the very least, if you're a rope puller, stall your fly and watch it curve. I mean, let the current, see a fast current when it's coming over it, come through an edge, come out, hit the fast current, stall your fly and watch it bend in half and watch the fish come out and say, "Oh, if that thing's fucked up, I'm going to go kill it." Right. And
Right.
that's where you're at. And now you learn something. Now you've went from a one-trick pony to a two-trick pony, right? Now you look at you go. Well, next thing you know, you'll be, jigging a fly. And it's just you're going through things. You're not, everything became in streamer big and fast, which is great on the day that they're on a big and fast eat because it's the funnest shit on earth. But the other 9 out of 10 days when they're not on that, you're kind of pounding. It's not
Yeah.
good. And so I would really encourage, and I'll tell you what, as far, not anymore, but for almost 20 years, this yellow stack blonde, I had more fish over 26 on than any fly out there, which is just a Joe Brooks blonde on a bent hook. It doesn't,
Hmm.
you could still do it. It's just bucktail. Very few things outfish bucktail. And, but it doesn't, so it just tells you that there's more to it than just a big flat, bright fly or black fly or whatever you're going to do. And to me, if I don't know if I get asked every day, if it was your last day, what would you fish? And I usually say 40-pound braid and a frog in a lily pad with a bait caster. uh, it would be, and I'll tell you, that's something that's really, one of my guides, Nate, he's big into the frogging here, day frogging. And man, he's turning some giant fish. It's kind of like scorpion, Russ's scorpion. We do a lot of that here.
Yeah.
Everybody wants to be this mouse guy. So I always did better on frogs than I did on mice. And but that's a new one too. It's just fun, but a lot of it's just like all that shit. Lots of blow ups, not so many positive eats, but it's just reactionary. It's what it is, and that's a lot of streamer fishing too. But I would do. I would just encourage people that have, and for certain, have 2.5 and 3-inch flies. Don't make your entire arsenal 5-inch size flies. I mean, I've got a new series coming out that are weightless. It's feather. I mean, it's a no body fly, weightless little fluke type styles where they flutter. They go all over the place, right? It is so fun to watch us. You can fish them on dry lines. I mean,
Yeah.
it's what a blast, right? And so those, I don't know if they'll be out this year or not, probably, but it's just a fun style where it's like I've always told people just don't be a rope puller. I mean, I float this river. I mean, my God, if you've got a busy day going, you can be within eyesight of 5, 6 boats all day. I mean, you can have a lot of boats on this river. And if I see 30 streamer anglers, everyone, I'm throwing that to the bank and ripping it back in 1 foot pulls or 6 inches as fast as they can. And they'll go all freaking day. completely avoiding the middle, of the river where the big fish are in the flats. And they just got locked in, right? And
Yep.
then it at the very least get 2 games, get one. I mean, let flies move, let them do things. You don't have to be ripping all the time.
I think it's one of the toughest things for string. I know I struggle with it. A lot of anglers I fish with, just letting the fly work and pause it. Just like you said, it's one of the toughest things. Like when I started smallmouth fishing, it was excruciating letting that fly sit so much longer. But when we did, we caught fish. It's just
when you stall a fly, when you get to the point of reading your water, and which is a whole nother can of worms to talk about, but when you're peripheral looking downstream before you get to it, so you can read a scene that's got a drop in it. If you've got a parallel color change and you've got a drop that maybe it goes from rock shelf to maybe it drops 2 feet, right? And whatever, it could be a log, it could be anything. When you learn to pull a fly over top of stuff and stall it when it hits the point where the current will actually do something to your fly, but you stop the fly. The second that fly hits the water, that fish knows, if he's 20 feet from it, he knows there's something on the water.
Mm-hmm.
I don't care how fast the water, I don't care. He's already on full alert. Rather, you trigger that response is another thing, and that's going to be what you do next. But when a fly's ripping off an edge or whatever it is, a flat, maybe it's a mid-river flat, and you're going to drop into another zone, a different style of water, maybe it's a 3-foot bucket, a holding zone, whatever it is, and you stall a fly that is already, the fish knows it's creating a wavelength that they understand. They're nocturnal hunters. They don't have to see the damn fly. They already know something's escaping, and it's within so many feet of them. They're already on attention. If that thing does a stutter, it stalls when it comes over it, and it's in the attack zone, you got about twice the opportunity if that fish beating the shit out of it. If you watch people working crankbaits, I've said this a million times on podcasts and seminars that if anybody could, if catching a fish in the bass tournament was simply throwing a goddamn crankbait and reeling it in, there'd be a lot of really rich anglers. But there's a difference. And I was telling you earlier about Shaw Grigsby. I don't think I finished that thought. Maybe I did, but I asked him, what's the difference between the top 50 and everyone else? I think we got cut off right there on something. So I go back to it when we were walking to go get lunch. And I said, Shaw, and remember, these guys fish for millions of dollars, right? And Shaw is in his 60s. Well, not then he wasn't, but he was in his 60s still competing with these people. And you start with thousands and tens of hundreds of thousands of anglers, and you got to build yourself up to get into these tournaments, right? You don't get to go pay to be in a tournament. That's not how it works. You don't get to go to the FedEx Cup and say, well, I got a lot of money. I'm going to go golf with Scheffler, right? Yeah, sure you are. Beat it. And so you got to get yourself there, and then you got to compete to get, let's say you're in the BSS, you're going to go to the Classic. Well, it starts with 50 of you, right? And then you just got to keep going down. This takes a long time to get there. Now you got the top 15, right? Or whatever it's going to be. And if you look, it's frequently 5 or 10 of them will be the same people. Not always. Nobody ever makes it, forever. And you gotta qualify every year. You don't just to walk into this shit because you're Bill Dance or somebody.
Right.
Not Bill Dance, but Kevin Van Dam, for example.
Sure.
But back in the day, Bill. But I mean, you don't get to walk in. And I said so, but Shaw keeps being there. And we're walking to lunch, and I realize, and I said, Shaw, what's the difference between the top 15 and everybody else in the world? How is it you guys make it? And he didn't use himself. He said it's there. He said it's their ability to manipulate their lure with their rod and not their reel. So in other words, when you get your new KVD Strike King Super Whistle Caster, or whatever Russ calls them, and you huck that son of a bitch out in the middle of the lake, and you just reel it back in, and you think you're going to win the tournament, you miss the subtleties that guy's putting into the lure with his rod and not just simply reeling it. There's days when that works, just like pulling the rope works some days. Mm-hmm. There's days where it doesn't. And I took that to heart when he told me. This is the first year the book came out. and we were still learning as we go. We still are. But, and I went, wow, there's more to just pulling the rope. And that it was a monumental moment in my life. And then I start watching these superstars and I'm like, oh, there is something more to it, right? Or else we'd all be there. So that, and when it into the flies, which we were talking about, it's critical that you learn that. It's critical that you realize that a sex dungeon doesn't get pulled like a zoo cougar, and surely not like a peanut envy or whatever supernatural Russ has got going.
Mm-hmm.
They all have different. If you've ever fished or watched Russ or Alex or any of these guys that they fish on video a lot, that you'll see they have more than just hucking it. Russ, you'll see stall flies a lot, and it's it's just learning why your fly's built. That comes back to the whole design, tying flies or whatever. It's why you build a fly. Is it made to do something? And that's why I said that new pattern I've got coming out, which is going to be, it's so simple. There's just nothing to it. It's a feather and a head, and there's no body. But it's made to do something not like we do with all our other flies. And it's fun to fish. So it gives you something. And that's what I really like about the new tires. You see, I'm always scrolling these kids on Instagram and stuff to see their flies, and it's like there's some creative shit going on out there, right? Which is good because it offsets the perdigons.
That fit in there pretty well. All right. We're going to settle something. I've got Kelly Galloup here. I've been wondering this for years. There's several different versions of this story out there. Where did the name of the dungeon come from?
Came from a gal. She has a slightly different version of it, what I did, but not too far. I remember it one way, she remembers it another. But I showed her the original, and my memory is, and she's the only girl that might actually have one. She said to me, she said, "Holy shit, that's got more shit in it than my sex dungeon." And being that I thought she might have one, I don't know. At least I couldn't admit to it if I did. And I went, "Oh, that's going to stick." And she has a slightly different version of it, but I can't remember what hers is because I kind of remembered how I remembered it. So that's what the story has always been. But yeah, it came from that. I don't know what the other one is, what the other versions are. I'm sure they're much more entertaining than this one. But
I think that one's pretty good. That's what I've heard, or at least the one I've heard the most. So
yes,
I get to, in a weird turn of events, I got to show and try to explain the genesis of the sex dungeon to Paris Hilton on a TV show. And then they cut the whole thing, which was kind of a,
she would have liked it.
yeah. She's
probably got one too.
I would believe it. She did say that's hot, and that's her catchphrase or whatever. But I thought that was
when that guy wrote the article about the names, he didn't use my name, but he used all my flies. And he said, the names of my flies create sexual violence, that's a big fucking statement. That's a big statement. That's not a good statement. And the first person that responded to that was April Vokey at 10:40 at night. And she said, "Whoa, shots fired. You got to get this guy." And I said, "Nah." I kind of knew some situation he had, but it went on. It grew legs, man. That thing got massive, and it was a total character assault and all this shit. But he has some circumstances in his personal life that I know created what he wrote, but he did not back down, and they started editing all the like April wrote in immediately, "Who are you?" And as you
Right.
recall, a year later, they wrote an article. It spawned an article. A gal wrote in there about her having swanky or skanky names. April said, "If you let me and my girlfriends do this, you'd never get one through because ours would be really dirty." and but then as that went on, and it's just politics in lieu of things that are happening just in the last couple of days, but. They had a fly called the Lynch Mob, which was their number, and it's this guy, right? It's his fly. So he has the audacity to say that my flies, first of all, almost every gal I talked to said, "Who's this guy who gets to say what sexual violence is? Who is he to speak to that?
Right.
And how does he know that my sex dungeon isn't, I made the sex dungeon. It's not a bad place for me, right?
Yeah.
Or as a pearl necklace, or as any of the other ones that came out. I mean, it's like, so you're some guy who has a circumstance in your life that creates this thing where you sit down and say, I get to tell the world. And then all the people that would actually be affected by that are saying, no, wait a minute, who do you get to say that? But then they forgot to mention, you can decide whether a sex dungeon's bad or good. I would think if you have one, you probably built it yourself and it's a good thing for you, right? You want it there.
Sure.
It's really hard to misconstrue what a fucking lynch mob is.
Right.
So suddenly when that came out, the whole argument died real quickly because you realize, what is this whole platform for? What the hell? It's fun. I've two of the biggest sales of the sex dungeon have been women coming in and buying them for their club.
Yeah.
And
Yep.
I asked the one gal, one gal bought 42 black sex dungeons. And I said, you must be using really light tippet or something. And she said, no, they're for our club annual event. They put them in these little poster board things, and they got their name. It's their name tag for their table.
Okay.
And she
Yeah.
goes, and the gal said, and they put them on there. I don't know how they get them glued or whatever they do. She goes, and her comment was perfect. She goes, every woman deserves a black sex dungeon. And the next gal that came in and did the same thing, bought a few less, about 30 some, and then pretty much the same comment came out. She goes, what's funner than a black sex dungeon? I go, bring it,
Yeah,
So,
exactly.
In this freaking world, you say what the fuck you mean. You can't make anybody happy. Shit, it doesn't matter what you do. So fuck them all. Just have fun. I mean, if that offends you somehow, whew, your life's, when we were filming one time, and Gene, my producer, and we had Flyfish TV, we're doing the video time videos, and he was always like, what's this one's name? And I'd say, whatever. And he says, oh, God, Kelly, I've got grandchildren. And I said, yeah, well, they're probably surfing porn by now anyway. And so, and we finally get to one, and he goes, and Johnny's standing beside him, and this is back when we shot film.
Yeah.
And to shoot a tying video took 8 hours, and you got the lights that are so hot. You can barely,
super hot. Yep.
Put makeup on your face because you're sweating down it, and they're just coming in and doing this shit. And it's like, oh, you're dying. Haven't drank enough water to be under these lights for 8 hours. And we get to this one, and it's a pearl necklace. And he goes, so what's this one's name? I said, it's a pearl necklace, Gene. Simple yet elegant. He goes, oh, finally. And he says, one I can say. And Johnny reaches over and tells him what it is. And he goes, oh, my God. I said, Gene, it's simple yet elegant. And it's just, let it play. It's not going to.
We're just trying to have some fun.
Exactly. It's like, if you're offended, you're going to be offended by everything.
Right.
So
exactly.
Don't buy them. There's your voice. Don't buy it. Buy one that's got a nice name, like a Supernatural. You know,
easy something. Well, careful. Who knows?
Yeah, exactly. Who knows what it is? Yeah, that is the story how it got there.
Awesome. Well, Kelly, let's wrap up. I'm sure you got 100,000 other things to do. You have so many, irons in the fire. So, tell us really briefly about how people find you. You've got the Slide In podcast. You've got a YouTube channel. You've got the Slide In website. You've got all sorts of stuff going on.
You just look up Kelly Galloup, will pop up, or Slide In. Either one will pop up, slidein.com. Or, just if my name goes in, it'll pop up on one of our bajillion things up there. So it won't be hard to find. But and then, or through MFC too. I mean, they've got tire stuff on their bios and shit like that. And so that's easy to see too. So, but it's
I've really enjoyed the podcast. It's fun for me, especially being in Northern Michigan, I hear names that I've been hearing forever. And so I see all these connections, and I don't know, it's such a fun thing to go back and hear about the people you learned from, and still connect with.
It's been really fun. Like I said, my shipping manager, Chris, is a great angler. Just the guy's fished more than anybody I've ever seen. He's a traveling, God, he goes everywhere. But I mean, on a 3-day weekend, it's nothing for him to drive 8 hours to get to a river to fish. But he kept trying to get me into them, and I didn't. I don't know why, because it's been really fun. It's been fun. Like I had Howard and Al on last week, and it's got fun. But it's kind of a cool trip down memory lane for me too, because somebody will ask a question. I'm like, shit. Somebody asked about an alewife pattern the other day, and that's where the TNA bunker came from. Originally, it was I think Russ he was trolling for trout in the lake and for browns.
Yeah.
I can't remember if it was the Bob Linseman. He used to juggle fish a lot, and he got a really big one it was Jerry Dennis and him and I, and at Mayo, and he juggled a big brown, 22, 23, 4-inch brown, and it pukes up a rainbow, and they're the wrong size. Couldn't be. They were planting the river, not telling people, and in the trophy water, which is get those pieces of shit out of there. Keep it brown trout, right? Great food, but we don't need to be drying in trophy water. It should have stayed what it was. And we contacted, and they told us, they put in 10,000 on it, but they just kept it hush hush. So I think the first one might have been for that to chase the big browns with the rainbow pattern. But I'm not positive, to tell you the truth, because Russ was doing we did one in a alewife color, gray and purple and white. And I think he got a big fish out one. Russ got a better memory than I do of all this stuff. He remembers everything. I don't know how he does it, but yeah, but it's just like some of those memory lanes that you get to roll back through because somebody asked a question. And I really dig the whole history. I think this whole, everything we do now is kind of, we forget history. And it's just, and I really find it, and I bitch about that with the perdigons and shit, and it's all tongue in cheek because I fish perdigons all the time. And I fish with a lot of the guys, that's all they do, right? And I don't give a shit, it's all fun. And it brought a lot of anglers in, and everything that was all good. But it was just, I missed the whole entomology, knowing your insects, knowing this, knowing that. She can't go out. Sorry. But I missed the historical portion of how we got here, right? The whole chasing an emergence. Well, if all you do is perdigons and flies in 2 zones, you don't really chase it. You don't know why. You got a fucking purple fly and a green fly on it. Well, they're all brown that are emerging. It just, everything's counterintuitive. And it may not matter, because if they eat the other ones better, who cares, right? If all your mission is to have a rod bent. But I miss and I think it's, particularly today, Flip Pallet passed yesterday, and just should have never happened. And you take the greatest teachers in the world and they're gone. And it's like, wow, that would really be tragic. That would be tragic to lose the history, or I don't think we ever will, because there's always people that want to know. There's just people that want to read. But I think it's really important that so for me, when we do the podcast, almost always something comes up, and it challenges you to remember accurately. It's just like the sex dungeon, right? I should call it on and get the real story on her side of it, because mine's more fun though.
Yeah.
Don't let the facts get in the way of a good story. I just can't, but it was something like that, because she always had one liner. She's the funniest gal you ever meet in your life. And so, but yeah, it was something like that. So the podcasts for me have been just, I'm really, I should have, when 8 years ago when Chris begged me to do it, I should have done it then, because they've been a blast. But,
Yeah.
and I was telling you, I'm going to put it out for questions. We've always used the studio in the fly tying room, right? And so when we're doing this expansion on the new shop, we were thinking about building, a nice looking one like you got, you know, not the chaos I have behind my fly tying table. I says, I just don't know if I can do it. It's so fun to be in that shit show of stuff people send me. And
Sure.
I mean, every week I get something new. I'm gonna have to, but it's just fun, right?
It is
It's
fun.
I
Well,
get-
let's put it out there to the world, and maybe I'll get this up on the MFC Instagram, and we'll get some votes going or something.
Yeah, see what it does. That would be
We'll
fun
crowdsource
because,
it.
I mean, I wouldn't, if I move it, it would be still the same theme and the same this and that. But, Brian Fletching came to me one day and he said, this is the most iconic fly tying table in the history of the world.
Yeah.
And I never really thought about it, but we filmed on that table for 17 years. And when we had Fly Fish TV, we would do that. I mean, I think that show hit 300,000 a day, and I mean, and then it reshoots like 3 or 4 times, and then it goes into reruns, and you got, 15 years of it. And then we did all of our videos at it, and then we did all our YouTube at it. And I really thought about it, right? But the table's never changed. It did get cut, and I put a wedge into it, but it's always been there, every fly that's ever been tied. And most guys tie really, like Charlie and those guys and Davey, tie really close. You don't really see where they're tying, right? Or they're in a studio. So it's kind of like, and you know where all that came from, by the way, in Michigan? When I forget who wanted, Sims, I think, or somebody wanted us to redecorate the shop, and they wanted to do it. It was all going to be like stainless steel and shit.
Sure.
It's not a freaking biker shop, you dumbass. And when we were setting it up, and it moved through different stages because we kept expanding the shop. That shop's now 6,000 square. When I bought it, it was 419 feet, and I lived in it, and with my family, and it's now, I think, an 11th remodel. Right, I get bored in the winter, and so we build shit out. But it's kind of the thrust has always been the table, that chunk of Michigan white pine is where it when I moved out here from Traverse City, the guys who did all my stuff at Treesome, I think it was called, and their slab tables and shit like that, and they did all the stuff in the shop. And so I said, I need a slab to bring with me. And they said, we got a chunk of white pine. And it was perfect, right? And so
Yeah.
brought it out and turned it into the table. But I just would be having a hard time taking it away because of the chaos and all the wood around it, right? But when the guys wanted to change it, and I've had other people write in, you should modernize your studio and blah, blah, blah. It's like, whatever. And I said, but when I sat down with Johnny and I says, you know what? Mort Neff, Michigan Outdoors, had this little tiny studio. It was all pine. I said, we're going to do this. I said, wood is synonymous with what we do. And we're never going to have a piece of fucking stainless steel in this shop in our life. And we're going to have it. I says, I felt growing up like I knew Mort Neff. I thought he was my uncle, right? And I can't remember the guy that came after him, but it was not Mort Neff. And it was like, it'll either work or it won't. But I'm not going to sell out and I just want it to be fun and real, right?
Yep.
So it's always stayed the same. Now it's like rolling 20 years into it, and there's just more shit back there. I had somebody write in me. I don't know how dumbass people can be. There's 2 hula girls in this on the back room,
Okay.
and both were given. One was given me by Johnny's wife Rosie, and one was given me by this other gal, which is the taller hula doll, but she actually is naked and she got her boobs showing. but she took these little tiny pixelated thing and she had it in a computer. She just cut it
Yeah.
out so her boobs look pixelated. So when you rocked her, it was like the old porn shows. And people wrote in and told me what a classless piece of shit I was for having hula girls on my, what a sexist pig. I says, oh, you just figured it out? Good job, you dumbass. Oh my God. What do you do with people?
I don't know. I haven't figured it out, but
Yeah, nobody has.
I vote keep the desk or move
Yeah.
it to wherever. I think it's too iconic to, but
And that's the problem. I don't know if I can move it, because it's in the store and it just like people like to see it. And the new shop.
well, you
will
said
be
people
all
take their pictures
fancy.
with it all the time.
Oh God,
Yeah.
5, 10 a day.
Yeah.
I mean, it's nothing. I mean, it's nothing to have that many in there. I mean, it's never, not every day. And I don't know how many people sat back there and I said, go ahead, tie away. I don't give a shit.
That's
And
awesome.
What? And they'll be back there and they'll be taking pictures and they'll have my clicks,
clicks on.
and shit. They'll put the clicks on, pull them apart, wait 14 seconds and they'll quit talking. You ever
That's
seen
awesome.
that one? I think Fletchen's the one that told me about it. It's a meme. It's something about if Kelly puts his glasses, takes them on, or takes them off, or puts them on. Fast forward 15 seconds because he'll be done talking, or maybe it's a minute. I don't know. It's forever. It is what it is. It's hilarious.
That's funny. Well, Kelly, thanks so much for joining us on the
It's been a
MFC
blast.
podcast here. This is something I hope we can do again. So
I love it.
I just think there's endless memories and ideas and concepts to explore and
For
fun to
sure.
be had. That's the whole point of this, right?
Changes
So,
every day. Every new
Yeah.
every new tire and angler that comes in changes the dynamic somehow.
Yeah.
And so gives you something to. It keeps it interesting.
that's the whole
And
point.
so,
Otherwise,
I'll be
we
back
wouldn't
if
do
you
it,
have me.
right? Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
For
you
sure
can
I'll come
find
back.
Kelly's patterns with their infamous names at MFC dealers all across the world. You should check them out. Slide in podcast. And if you're in Montana, it sounds like you can stop by and sit behind the desk yourself. So
Heck, take a picture.
yeah, that's right.
Dudley will sit with you.
There should,
That's
I mean,
great.
you should have a letterhead from the desk of Kelly Galloup and then have a picture of the desk or something. That'd be kind of cool. I don't know.
That would
Just
be
an
fun.
idea.
I like that. I'll tell Braden. He'll get on it.
Yeah. Delegate,
He
right?
owns us
That's the
for
key.
ruining. He owns us for ruining our podcast.
Well, it's okay because he's done so many good ones with you. So appreciate it big time.
Well, my pleasure.
All right.
Always
Well, everybody, if you haven't done so, because apparently this works, like, subscribe.
I
all
can
that
remember
fun
to say
stuff.
it for you. I can remember to say it for you.
Yeah,
Don't
easy.
forget to like and subscribe.
Awesome.